This is the video for the first part of the watercolor project, which is to find some interesting objects around the house and then trace them out on one of your sheets of watercolor paper. I'm using, this is a mixed media pad that I have, so it's a little bit larger than the paper you've got, but it's pretty much the same paper. So the first thing you ought to do is just play with the arrangement of objects that you have, and if you don't like one of the objects or you think it's going to take up too much space, you can remove it. And you can overlap objects as well. You don't have to, they don't all have to be separate from each other. So, spend some time making a sort of interesting composition, something that you think looks good. So maybe like one more object in there. All right, so there's my composition. Now I'm going to trace it out. And you can use pencil to trace. If you use marker or pen, make sure it's waterproof pen because you're going to be adding watercolor to this. So make sure you use like a micron pen or a thin Sharpie. If you don't have waterproof markers, you can do it in pencil. That's totally fine. Now I'm going to do it in marker just so you guys can see the lines really well. Once you've got your objects traced out, fix any little gaps or mistakes that you might have. And then the last thing to do is to draw a border around the entire composition. If you don't have to use a ruler for this, you can do this freehand or you can use a ruler. If your objects went right to the edge of the paper, then that's fine. Then the edge of your paper is going to be your border. But I need a border for mine. So that's roughly the same size as the paper that you guys have. It's maybe, like I said, a little bit bigger. The last thing to do is to find an interesting way to break up some of the empty negative space. So you might use a pattern or some kind of pleasing arrangement of lines in order to break up the space. So, for example, I might do kind of a radial pattern coming from roughly the center of my composition. And this is to break up the surrounding negative space to give us more opportunity to experiment with different watercolor techniques. And I'm being very careful and considerate about where I create these lines so that I don't sort of injure or damage the composition I already have, but I sort of add to it or accentuate it in a somewhat interesting way. You can think about the ways to break up the space where you're able to create these sort of puzzle pieces, but at the same time, you are trying to create an interesting composition at the same time. All right, so I've got some interesting interplay there of kind of line work and design work and pattern and the objects that I chose. And so I'm going to stop there, and that is the very first part of getting started.